Alrighty guys, what's going on? So today we're going to be doing a tier list for all the mythic items that are getting removed this next patch and what I personally think about them. These are not going to be the most accurate, the best, the challenger, which items are the best. These are going to be me personally. I am going to try to be a little unbiased because there are a few items that I think are great, but they're great on situational and champions that I use personally. So I will say this is where I think it is, and this is where I think it'll be if I have one of those items. But overall, I'm just going to try to be as unbiased as humanly possible, even though it's a personal list. Hey guys, so to start off, we have Night Harvester. Now, I don't mind Night Harvester. It's not a great item. I like that it gives, what is it, ability haste. But I think items like Rocket Belt are just a better version of it. And for that reason, I'm going to put it in high C. We'll call it high C. Not the best item. As long as you know how to use actives, I think Proto Belt is better. So for that reason, it's going to be in C. Next, we have Ginshoes. I think there's better items than Ginshoes. I guess I'll put it in C as well. Ginshoes is okay. Like it's good for Ogma. But besides that, when I'm looking at it, I don't really see many champions that would use that over something like Infinity Edge or right now with lethality. Although I think lethality's kind of dropped off a bit, but with lethality, a lot of ADCs are going lethality builds, right? So I just don't see Ginshoes being a super duper great item. I think it has its place on certain champions, but a lot of champions aren't going to utilize it. Now we got Rod of Ages. Now it's in saying that I enjoy Rod of Ages, or I did up until like I just realized that there's better utility for like Leandries. I think is good. I think that item outshines pretty much all AP items. I don't think it's really close when you really break it down, and same with Ludens. Those two items just kind of carry that class, and unless you're playing someone like Aurelion Sol that takes a while to scale up, or even if you play like a Cassiopeia or something along those lines. But otherwise than that, I'm gonna put this at D. I just really don't think it's the best item. You can go ahead and you can use other items instead of it. And a lot of the time, like when you're having those scaling picks, it's gonna take long to get strong anyways, right? So might as well go with an item that overall just is better right off the get-go and can jump you to that power spike a little quicker. Now Divine Sunder. Now if we're looking back when Divine Sunder first showed itself, I really love Divine Sunder. But if we're looking at it now, it's outshadowed by Trinity Force and Frostfire. And I just don't think there's no reason to take it over those two items. So we're just going to chuck that right below Ginshoes. Now for Crown. Crown has its place. If you're trying not to get one shot and you're a very squishy AP champion, sure. But like I said with Rod of Ages, there's much better items to go ahead and use instead of it. Like, and in the end of the day, if an assassin's strong, he's gonna one shot you regardless right after. He's gonna break the shield and come back. You might as well just go the orb item that does the exact same thing. You might as well, right? So for that reason, we're gonna chuck that. We're gonna chuck that in D as well. Navari Quick Blades. I personally like it, but it doesn't have that. It's not great on a multitude of champions, right? Like it can be utilized well by some champions, but in the end of the day, you're looking for the best overall item, and a lot of the time, it's not, right? So we're gonna chuck that. We're gonna chuck that in B, but it's gonna probably be the last item in B. Next is Gale Force. I like Gale Force. I think Gale Force it includes an extra dash, and on champions like Yasuo, Jin, things like that kind of set the standard for the meta for a little bit. And for that reason, like I'm gonna put that in B for the time being. I might switch that up. Just because I do enjoy items that go ahead, give you a dash, things like that. It can get you out of some really tough situations for sure. Um, Next we got Moonstone. It's gonna be an S. Moonstone is continuously a great item. The healing, the shielding, all of it. I think it's it's not underutilized by any means, but when it's used and the person knows, like playing a Soraka or Sona or things like that, sometimes it can be just extremely frustrating the amount of healing that it does, and for that reason, we're going to chuck it in S. Especially, there was that little time during this season where it was the best item. Like, you had Udyr building it, right? And when that happens, that's just an item's too strong, and it makes it the best item. Next, we got Liandry's, and I already kind of talked about it. I think Liandry's is probably the best item in the game, in my opinion. I think it gives you that ability for it acts as anti-heal. Um, it burns larger targets based on health. It's just continuously good for poke champions, and almost any AP champion can utilize it. Plus, its ability haste that it has built into its mythic passive. Like, I think it's just overall one of the best items. Now, for the third in a row, we're gonna have Trinity Force, and I think it's better than Moonstone, but it's definitely gonna be an S. Like, this item was being built on every single champion in the game. You're looking at like Draven, and then Vayne was building it. Then you have a whole bunch of top laners building it, junglers building it. It's best item. You know what? I'm gonna chuck it ahead of Liandry's. I think it's the best item in the game. Definitely a little too strong. When you have champions that are going ahead and going away from their own mythic items, like I said, like the Dravens, the Vaynes, things like that, that just means that it's too strong of an item. And for that reason, it's going to be the number one item. Plus, I use it a lot on pretty much all the champions I use at one point or another. You can use it on those champions. Now we got Locket. I think Locket's a good item. Wouldn't say it's my favorite item when I do play support, which is very minimal. But I'd have to say it's probably mid A. So when we eventually get through to it, I would say it's mid A. But I'm not a support main. I don't use it too much, and to be honest with you, when I do play with supports, it's very odd that they actually click it and pay attention to it. So next we have Youmuu's, which once again was one of those items that was just meta. This is probably gonna be top of A. Especially when you have champion, like everybody was building it. It was the lethality item, and that was the issue with a lot of lethality items this year, was there was never it was hard for them. It was either Duskblade or Youmuu's, and they would kind of flip flop, flip flop, flip flop, and every single assassin would build one when it was meta, and then they would switch to the other when it was the opposite meta. So for that reason, Duskblade and Youmuu's are probably going to be very close to each other. Now we have Stridebreaker, which I think is a high A. I'm not going to quite put it in S. I think it's a really great item. It's got a really great active, and it's utilized by a lot of top laners. Like, I don't think it's as good as the Trinity Forces, the Liandry's, the Moonstones of the world, but it's definitely like probably one of the best items. Next we got Heartsteel. Now, this can be a little bit controversial, but I'm gonna chuck it in low S tier. You'll have some people say like, oh, it's better to just go a full fighter build then instead of putting it on a tank, and things like that. But I think for sure having Heartsteel pretty much on any top laner for the most part can work, right? It's versatile. It gives that. It's essentially a grasp proc. Plus, when you have grasp on it, it's an insane item. Like, I play a lot of Ornn. Not that I really build that item with Ornn, but when I do, it's a great item. Gives you the damage that you want. Gives you the ability to go in and out with grasp. It's a good item. Now, if we're going from the beginning of the season, and we're talking about Jack shows, it would probably be number one item. You had champions like Fiddlesticks building it. Hecarim, everybody was building this item because it was just so strong. They've kind of toned it back, and Heartsteel's kind of taken over for the second half. And for that reason, we're gonna chuck it in. We're gonna chuck it in A tier. It's utilized not nearly as much. Granted, this might be one of my biases because it is one of my favorite items. I do play a lot of Ornn, and it's generally my number one item on Ornn. So I think it's top of A tier. If we're taking, actually, we're gonna chuck it behind Stridebreaker. Stridebreaker's been more consistent, and so is Youmuu's. But if I had to say personally, like, I think Jack Shows is a good item, but it's not great on every single champion. Before, when you could chuck it on Lilia or Fiddlesticks or whoever it was, great item. But I just don't think it's up there anymore. Next we have Duskblade. And like I said, it's a flip-flop between the two. And now this is where my personal bias is going to come into hand. I definitely think Stridebreaker and Youmuu's were far and none better. I think anytime you have a heavy movement speed active on an item, I think it's just strong. You're playing a Talon, you can get away. You're playing when Lethality Hecarim was a thing. A lot of people were opting for Youmuu's for that increased movement speed, right? In the end of the day, movement speed can be life or death, and I think that's why I'm gonna put it there ahead of. That's why I'm gonna put Duskblade there behind Youmuu's. Next, we got Eclipse, and I'm not a fan of Eclipse. Definitely has its place with some champions, but I'm just gonna be straight honest. I don't use it the most, and I think the other two items there, Duskblade and Youmuu's, are just way more optimal and way better. For that reason, we're probably gonna have that closer to bottom of B tier. Like, you can build it, but I just don't think that it's a great item by any means. Next, we have Hextech Rocket Belt, which I personally think is a fantastic item. I don't think it's quite A tier worthy, but it's definitely high tier B. And I'm probably gonna say top tier B, right beside Gale Force. Those AP assassins and just essentially any person trying to get in close, like Galio with it works, Akali with it works, and the magic penetration that it has for its passive for the mythic item is fantastic, and it much better than Night Harvester. So for that reason, we're gonna chuck that at B. Yeah. Next we got Radiant Virtue. And Radiant Virtue is, for me, once again, this is for me, it's probably the second most built item I have on Ornn. When I know I'm going to have to team fight a lot, and we disengage, and then I use it to re-engage after our team gets poked out a little bit, I think it's a fantastic item. But how many champions is it that great on? Like, I know Alistar uses it. I've seen Nami use it before, which I don't think is very great. But I would put it, being an Ornn player, I would put it probably ahead of Rocket Belt, but I don't think it's there. I'm gonna chuck it right behind Gale Force. I'm gonna chuck it right behind Rocket Belt. I think Rocket Belt has more. You can use it more. You can play around it more. And I just don't think overall Radiant Virtue is the best item on every single champion, right? Next we got Frostfire Gauntlet, which I think is, I'm gonna put it here. It's a hard one. Like, I think it's a great item. Like I said, it's giving you CC for free, and it's AoE CC, and I think that's awesome. Plus it has the Sheen proc on it. It's just an overall good item. Yeah, no, we're gonna put it in A tier. That might be another personal bias being a tank player, but I think it's a fantastic item. Like I said, the slow and in team fights, that can be crucial for your teammates hitting AoE damage. And when you have champions like Alawi, it's fantastic. It slows them when they're already going to be slowed when they get out of her E. I think overall it's a good item. Like I said, plus the Sheen proc. Sheen is just disgusting. So I think we're gonna chuck that in that mid to high A tier. Next we got Infinity Edge. I don't think it's S tier. I just I don't. Um, it gives minimal AD as its mythic passive. It's kind of expensive. So for that reason, we're gonna chuck it. We're gonna chuck it right ahead of Duskblade, because I say a lot of people will intertwine those two. Like you have Samira that will build either or. Um, I don't personally. I'm not a huge fan of Infinity Edge. I don't play many champions that utilize it well, but I do think that it definitely has its place, and the overall damage that it can bring is slightly ridiculous. Next, we got Ludens. Now, I think Ludens is better than Yomu's. I Ludens is very similar to that of Leandris. I think Leandris is better, but I think Ludens can be used on every single AP champion in the game, and it has been utilized on every single AP champion in the game. Just the burst that it brings and the magic penetration that it brings. It's a very, very, very good item. I don't think it's an S tier item. Because I would rather build Leandries over it by quite a far margin for the most part. Obviously, team comp, things like that. If people can get one shot easier, I'm going to obviously go ahead and go with Ludens. But I think situationally, 95% of the time, I would pick Leandries over Ludens. If it was completely even. If I could one shot some of them and some of them were really tanky and vice versa, I'm picking Ludens 95% of the time. Next, we got Gore Drinker. Now, Gore Drinker at the beginning of the season was fantastic. I mean, it was really, really, really good. Pretty much every single champion in the game was utilizing it. And it was really, really good. But it's obviously gotten overshadowed by Stridebreaker now, and pretty much any champion that can build Gore Drinker can go ahead and build Trinity Force. In the end of the day, Gore Drinker just kind of has fallen behind. I'm pretty sure they nerfed it pretty heavily, but it's kind of just fallen behind pretty bad. And I am not gonna completely penalize it based on where it is now. At one point, it was a great item, so we're actually just gonna chuck this in the top of B tier, because it was utilized on so many champions and it was so strong at one point. But we're obviously looking more towards the recent future, or sorry, the recent rather than the past. And that item definitely would have been S tier in the past, but it's just no longer there. Now, another item that was used pretty heavily in the past would have been Everfrost. I enjoyed Everfrost. I thought it was a good item, but it kind of, once again, it just got overshadowed by the big two, for the most part. Like, sure, there's champions that are going to utilize it because it's CC, and I have sat here and I said, oh, CC and movement speed, things like that, are the best items in my opinion. I just think it kind of just got overshadowed. It does take a little bit for, it's not slow by any means, but it does take a second. Sometimes you'll click it and they'll be in the middle and they only get slow, they don't get stunned. And I think for that reason, it kind of just fell out, for me personally. If that wasn't the case, if it was instant, I'd probably have it ranked a little higher. But for now, I'm gonna chuck it in the C tier. I think it's better than Night Harvester and Ginshu's, but I'm gonna chuck it. I'm gonna chuck it there just because, once again, kind of the same thing that happened with Divine Sunderer. It's just kind of outmatched by the other two items. Next, we have Shurelya's. I'm, like I said, not the biggest support player of all time. So the support items are going to be a little messed up. Like, I'm sure a lot of you are looking at it right now. Oh, Locket might be a little too high, or Rocket should be S tier, whatever it may be. But I think Shurelya's is good. I don't think it's great. Funny enough, kind of the trope, unlike what I said previously, oh, it gives you movement speed, it's great, and it's team movement speed. But I just don't think it's that. I don't think it's better than Iron Locket, personally. And we're going to actually just chuck that right ahead of Gore Drinker. I think it just fits there nicely. And like, I've had teammates use this and it's gotten me kills. I've had teammates have this and not use it at all. I think it's kind of wishy-washy, and me not being a support player, probably there is bias there. Just because I've never really utilized it that often. Next, we got another item, support item, that I don't think I've ever used. And for that, we're gonna chuck it in D tier because I've also rarely ever seen anybody use it. I know when it first came out, people were using it quite heavily, but it's dropped off significantly. I don't really ever see it. Um, and for that reason, I'm just gonna chuck it there because I have limited knowledge of even what it does. And I think if no one else is using it and I never see it as a primary build, there's got to be a reason for it. I know, like, once again, it was strong at one point, but yeah, it's not the cream of the crop. Next, we got Riftmaker. I fucking hate Riftmaker. I think Riftmaker sucks. It can only really be utilized by 3 champions that I can think of off the top of my head. And those 3 champions are Teemo, Kayle, and Gwen. Those 3 champions, they can utilize it well. Teemo, it's not even optimal. Liandry's is optimal for Teemo. Gwen, I would say it's pretty good on her, but then you have Kayle, who can utilize Ginshus instead, right? And Riftmaker obviously is a little bit better on her, but she can utilize that, right? I just don't think Riftmaker's a very great item. I hate Riftmaker actually. And for that reason, it's going to be the lowest of low tier. Even over an item that I don't know, I just think Riftmaker is just not useful anymore. I think it's a waste of an item. Lastly, we have Even Shroud. Now, Even Shroud, its passive is good. I think it has a good passive. I wouldn't say it's exceptionally strong. I think Moonstone, Locket, and Shurelya's kind of dominate the support market. And Even Shroud isn't just isn't doesn't compare to those other 3 items. Those other 3 items can be utilized by almost everyone, and Even Shroud, although could be good on some champions, other items are better. And for that reason, we're gonna chuck it right behind Echo, and that's gonna be it. Now, thank you guys so much for watching. I know I probably said some things that you fucking hate. That you disagree with and you think, oh, this guy's an idiot. And that's fine. That doesn't bother me. This is just my personal opinion on where I would rank items. And sure, in the end of the day, you can never get rid of complete bias. But thank you guys so much for watching and have a great day.